Have you ever seen a little girl raise her hand in public and realized she wasn't just waving? In a quiet supermarket aisle, surrounded by cereal boxes and strangers, a biker covered in tattoos froze because he recognized that signal, a signal that could mean the difference between safety and tragedy. Before we go on, allow me to wish you peace and good health. Tell me, from which country and at what time are you watching this story? In the town of Whitefish, where the mountains guard the sky and strangers still nod good morning, Jack Callahan believed he'd made peace with his ghosts until that autumn day proved him wrong. Morning light spilled through the maples that lined Main Street, scattering gold across the cracked sidewalks. The smell of coffee drifted from the diner at the corner, where the bell above the door jingled every few minutes. Inside, regulars talked about the weather, the fishing, and the high school football game, their voices blending with the hum of the old jukebox. Jack sat alone in his usual booth, the one near the window where he could see the town wake up. He liked mornings here, quiet, predictable, forgiving. His leather jacket hung on the seat beside him, worn and softened by years on the road. A waitress named Betty, a woman with a kind smile and tired eyes, poured him another cup of black coffee. "Morning, Jack," she said. Same as always," he replied, offering a faint smile. He left a few dollars under his saucer, more than the bill, then nodded toward the boy mopping the floor. "Give him the tip, Bet. Kid's working harder than I am." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You and your soft spots." Outside, a breeze carried the scent of pine and rain. Across town, Claire Donovan hurried down her porch steps, her hospital badge swinging from her neck. She had the worn patience of someone used to double shifts and short nights. Her daughter, Emily, trailed behind, clutching a lunchbox decorated with a dragon she'd drawn herself. "Come on, sweetheart," Claire said. "We'll be late for school." Emily's shoes scuffed the pavement as they walked past the white picket fences and pumpkins on porches. She noticed everything: the shimmer of dew on spiderwebs, the way sunlight caught the church steeple, the cat sleeping in the neighbor's window. The town felt safe to her, a place where bad things belonged only in stories. When they reached the corner near the elementary school, Claire crouched and fixed the little scarf around her daughter's neck. "Remember, after class, go straight to the library. I'll pick you up after my shift, okay?" Emily nodded, her eyes bright. "Okay, Mom. Can I borrow markers for art today?" "If Mrs. Patterson says yes, then yes," Claire said, kissing her forehead. "Be good, Em." Jack passed them on his way to the grocery store, tipping his chin in greeting. "Morning, Miss Donovan." Claire offered a polite nod. Everyone knew Jack Callahan, the quiet man who fixed motorcycles, rode with the Veterans Club, and kept mostly to himself. To most people, he was just another small-town figure, fading into the background of daily life. But behind his calm eyes, there lived a restlessness no one saw. By noon, the town gathered for the weekly assembly at Whitefish Elementary. 200 children sat cross-legged on the gym floor, fidgeting, whispering, waiting for something interesting to happen. On stage stood Sergeant Hannah Brooks, a tall woman in a crisp uniform with a steady voice that carried authority without harshness. "Good morning, kids," she began. "I'm here to teach you something that could save your life someday." The chatter quieted. She lifted her hand, palm out. "Watch closely. You tuck your thumb into your palm, like this. Then fold your fingers over it." Her hand closed gently, thumb hidden. "This is called the signal for help. If you ever feel unsafe but can't speak, you can use this. People who know what it means will recognize it." A ripple of curiosity passed through the room. Emily sat in the third row, her small fingers mimicking the gesture. Her friend Maya giggled beside her, but Emily took it seriously, repeating the motion until it felt natural. Sergeant Brooks smiled. "Good. Let's practice again. Remember, sometimes the quietest signal can be the loudest cry for help." When the bell rang that afternoon, children poured from the school like birds set free. Leaves swirled around their sneakers, laughter echoing through the crisp Montana air. Emily waited near the gate until she spotted her mother's old Subaru pulling up beside the curb. Claire waved through the window, exhaustion softened by relief. "Hop in, sweetheart." And they stopped by the market for milk and bread, then drove home along the road that wound past Flathead Lake. The surface of the water mirrored the late sun, gold, soft, endless. Emily pressed her forehead to the window, drawing invisible patterns in the glass.
"Mom," she said, "do you think that hand signal really works?"
Claire glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "I think it could, honey. You never know when small things like that matter." Emily nodded solemnly. "Sergeant Brooks said it could save lives." "That's right," Claire replied, "and I hope you'll never need to use it." By the time they reached their small yellow house, the shadows had lengthened across the yard. The garden still carried the scent of summer sunflowers leaning tiredly, tomato vines curling near the fence. Emily ran to pick one last bloom before frost came. Inside, Claire set dinner on the table, chicken, soup, and cornbread, and the two ate while the radio murmured old country tunes in the background. After dinner, Emily spread her sketchbook across the table, coloring a dragon soaring above mountains that looked suspiciously like the ones surrounding Whitefish. Claire watched her with quiet affection. For all the exhaustion that her job demanded, these moments reminded her why she kept going. When Emily wasn't looking, she slipped one of the drawings from the stack, a picture of two hands folded together under a bright sky, and tucked it under the magnet on the fridge. Across town, Jack Callahan locked up his workshop as twilight deepened. The faint smell of oil and pine clung to his jacket. He wiped his hands on a rag, then looked out toward the mountains silhouetted against the fading light. Some evenings, when the air grew still, he swore he could hear the echo of a girl's laughter, his sister's from decades past. He tried not to think about Sophie, but memory had its own way of coming back. She'd been 12 when she vanished. A walk home that never ended. Search parties, flyers, questions that hollowed out the years. And then, nothing. Only silence, long and heavy, until silence became a habit. Jack poured himself a cup of coffee, sat on the porch, and listened to the sound of life around him, the bark of a distant dog, the train whistle from down the valley, the low hum of wind through the pines. Whitefish had given him peace, or something close to it. Yet tonight, under the dim porch light, that peace felt fragile, like the skin of ice forming on a pond. He thought of the little girl he'd seen that morning, the one with the dragon lunchbox, her hand tucked in her mother's. There was something pure in the way she looked at the world, untouched by the kind of sorrow he carried. He envied that innocence, wished it could last longer for her than it had for Sophie. Night crept in, cool and still. He switched off the porch light and headed inside. The cabin smelled faintly of cedar and old leather, the way it always did after a long day. He set his keys down, hung his jacket, and stared for a moment at the photograph on the mantel, a fading image of a boy in a Marine uniform, his arm around a young girl with a bright, fearless smile. Jack closed his eyes, and the years between then and now fell away. The forest outside whispered softly, wind brushing against the walls like a memory that refused to fade. He climbed into bed, the old quilt heavy and familiar, and drifted toward sleep with the sound of the pines rustling beyond the window. That night, as the wind rustled through the pines outside his cabin, Jack dreamed of his sister's voice whispering, "You didn't see me in time." Rain had begun to fall that Thursday afternoon, the kind of steady drizzle that softened the edges of everything. The Whitefish Community Library glowed like a small beacon in the gray, its windows fogged with warmth and the faint scent of paper and coffee drifting out whenever the door opened. Inside, children's laughter mixed with the quiet rustle of pages turning. At a table near the window sat 8-year-old Emily Donovan, her legs swinging above the floor, her tongue caught between her teeth as she colored the wings of a dragon. Her backpack lay open beside her, a sandwich half eaten, a library card poking from the pocket. Mrs. Clay, the librarian, a silver-haired woman with cat-eye glasses and a cardigan covered in enamel pins, smiled as she shelved a row of books nearby. "That's a fine dragon, Miss Emily," she said. "He looks like he's about to fly right out the window." Emily giggled. "He's almost done. I just need to make his scales shiny." The clock ticked quietly above the desk. Outside, headlights shimmered through the rain. It was the kind of day that made the world feel safe, sealed in by soft weather and familiar places. Claire's shift at the hospital wouldn't end for another hour, and the library had always been their in-between space, a haven of stories, where time waited. She didn't notice the man standing near the biography section at first. He blended in easily, tall but unremarkable, dressed neatly in khaki pants and a button-down shirt. His glasses caught the light in a way that made his eyes unreadable. He pretended to skim the spines of books, but his attention stayed fixed on the little girl at the table. His name was Darren Harlow. To anyone watching, He could have been a father waiting for his child to finish reading. But his hand trembled slightly as he turned a page he wasn't reading. It had taken him weeks to plan this moment, to study the schedule, to wait for the right day when Claire would be working a double shift and Emily would be here, alone for just long enough. When he finally stepped forward, his smile was warm, familiar, practiced. "Emily," he said softly, "thank God I found you." Emily looked up, puzzled. For a moment, she couldn't place him. The man's face seemed faintly familiar, like a picture she'd once seen but forgotten. "Do I know you?" "It's me, Darren. I used to visit you and your mom a long time ago." His tone was calm, careful. "Your mom's been in an accident at the hospital. She asked me to come get you. We have to go." Her colored pencil slipped from her hand. "An accident?" He nodded, stepping closer. "She's okay, but she needs you right now. Come on, sweetheart." Mrs. Clay was helping another patron at the counter, her back turned. The rain outside had picked up, pattering against the glass in a rhythm that drowned small sounds. Emily's heartbeat seemed to match it, quick, uneven. She tried to remember what her mother had told her. Don't go with strangers. But Darren didn't feel like a stranger. He knew her name. He knew her mother's job. He even mentioned the hospital. Her mind spun. "She sent you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes," he said gently. "She's waiting. We have to hurry before visiting hours close." Something about the way he said it, soft, coaxing, made her want to believe him. But her fingers tightened around the edge of her drawing, knuckles pale. She glanced at the door where the rain streaked down the glass, and then back to her sketch of the dragon, its wings spread wide as if ready to protect her. Darren reached for her hand. "Let's go, Emily. Your mom needs you." Emily hesitated, her small hand hovering just above his. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence between them. Something about Darren's smile didn't match the kindness. In his words, it felt stretched, fragile, like a mask waiting to slip. I should tell Mrs. Clay," Emily murmured. Her voice trembled, though she tried to sound brave. Darren's expression softened, the perfect imitation of concern. "We don't have time, sweetheart. Your mom said to hurry. The car's just outside." Her chest tightened. If mom's hurt, if she's scared. She gathered her drawings and slid them into her backpack, leaving one the dragon with shining wings on the table. Darren gently placed a hand on her shoulder, steering her toward the door. The warmth of his touch felt wrong, like a shadow pressing too close. Mrs. Clay turned from the counter just as they reached the exit. "Leaving already, Emily? Tell your mom I said hello." Emily looked back, her lips parting. For a fleeting moment, she almost said something, almost made the signal Sergeant Brooks had shown them. But fear coiled tight in her chest. She only managed a small, nervous wave. "Will do," Darren answered smoothly, opening the door for her. Rain spilled in sideways, wetting the doormat. The world outside looked dim and unfamiliar. They stepped into the drizzle. Darren held an umbrella over her, his voice low. "You're being very brave. Your mom will be proud." She nodded, clutching her backpack straps. Her shoes splashed through puddles as they crossed the street. When they reached his car, a dark sedan parked under the trees, her stomach twisted. The back seat was cluttered with old magazines and a fast food bag. He opened the passenger door for her. "Hop in." Emily hesitated again. Then, as Darren bent to close his umbrella, she glanced at the phone lying inside her open bag. The thought flashed like lightning. If mom's hurt, someone has to know where I am. Her fingers shook as she unlocked it. Her mother's name sat pinned at the top of her messages. She typed quickly, barely breathing. "Help, Lib." The screen flickered message sent. She stuffed the phone back into her bag just as Darren straightened up. "Everything okay, kiddo?" he asked. "Yes," she whispered. Her voice was so small he barely heard it. He smiled again, that same too smooth smile, and closed the door behind her. Rain streaked across the window, blurring the world outside. Inside the library, Mrs. Clay returned to shelving books, humming softly to the tune of the rain. On the table near the window, Emily's drawing lay forgotten, its dragon caught mid-flight. Wings spread wide as if trying to escape the page. And on the counter, unnoticed beneath a stack of returned books, the library's front desk phone began to blink, a new message waiting, unheard in the quiet of the afternoon. At the county hospital, the fluorescent lights hummed softly against the ceiling. and the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and rain. Claire Donovan leaned over the reception counter, flipping through a patient chart when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She almost ignored it. Her hands were full, and the nurse beside her was asking about a new admission, but something about the vibration felt urgent. She pulled the phone out, wiping her damp fingertips on her scrubs. On the screen, beneath her daughter's contact photo, a smiling face framed by two crooked braids was a single message. "Help Lib." Claire stared at it, her pulse stuttering. "What?" she whispered. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Then she read it again, slower this time, every letter digging deeper into her chest. "Help Lib. Library." The phone slipped slightly in her hand. She turned to the nurse. "Call the front desk. Tell them I'm stepping out." "Claire? What's wrong?" But she was already halfway down the hall, her heart pounding loud enough to drown the clatter of hospital carts. Outside, the rain had grown heavier, the clouds pressing low over the valley. She fumbled for her keys, her hands trembling so badly she dropped them once before unlocking the car. The drive from the hospital to the library was only 10 minutes, but every red light felt endless. Windshield wipers beat back the rain in frantic rhythm, and the world blurred into streaks of gray and yellow. Claire's thoughts twisted between fear and disbelief. She must have mistyped. Maybe she meant something else. Maybe she's fine. But then she remembered the safety lecture from the police sergeant, the signal for help, the lessons Emily never stopped talking about. By the time she turned onto Main Street, the clock on the dashboard read 4:12 p.m. The library parking lot was nearly empty. Her stomach dropped. She ran inside, breath catching in her throat. Mrs. Clay looked up from behind the counter, surprised. "Claire, I thought you were on shift. Emily left about—" Claire's voice broke. "With who?" Mrs. Clay frowned. "A man. Said he was a family friend. Tall, glasses. He said you'd been in an accident." For a moment, Claire couldn't breathe. "That's not true," she whispered. "That's not true." She turned, scanning the tables. The small pink raincoat still hung on the back of a chair, but the seat was empty. The drawing on the table caught her eye. A dragon with wings like sunlight, fierce and bright. Emily's dragon. Her vision blurred. She clutched the edge of the table to steady herself. Did she say anything before she left? Mrs. Clay shook her head, her expression shifting from confusion to horror. "She looked nervous, but I thought, God, Claire, I thought she knew him." Claire grabbed her phone. "Call 911, she said, her voice shaking but clear now. "Tell them it's a possible abduction, Whitefish Community Library. My daughter, 8 years old, blonde hair, blue jacket. Please just call." Then she turned and ran back into the storm. Outside, the rain hit harder, needling her face as she scanned the street. There were no cars she recognized, no sign of Emily. Just the quiet drip of water from the trees and the flashing neon sign of the diner across the road. She stumbled toward it, shouting, "Emily!" But the street only answered with the low rumble of thunder rolling across the mountains. Behind her, the phone in her hand lit up again, a new message from an unknown number. "Don't call the police if you want her back safe." Claire froze, her heartbeat roaring in her ears. For a long moment, Claire couldn't move. The message glared up at her from the phone screen, the letters sharp against the pale glow. "Don't call the police if you want her back safe." Her breath caught in her throat, then came out in a broken whisper. No, you don't get to take her." Her hands shook as she hit the dial anyway. 911. The dispatcher's calm voice answered. "Whitefish Emergency Services. What's your—" "My daughter's been taken," Claire said, the words tumbling out too fast. "She's 8 years old. From the public library. I just got a message threatening me not to call you." "Ma'am, stay calm. What's your name?" "Claire Donovan." "Okay, Claire. We've already received a call from a Mrs. Clay at the library. Officers are on their way. Do you have any idea who the man might be?" "No," she said, gripping the phone tighter. "He said he was a friend. God, I don't know anyone by that name." "Stay where you are," the dispatcher instructed. "Can you describe your daughter's clothing?" "She's wearing a blue raincoat, yellow sneakers, and she has a dragon drawing in her backpack," Claire said, tears finally spilling over. Outside, headlights flashed across the street as a police SUV pulled up beside the curb. Sergeant Hannah Brooks stepped out, her uniform darkened by the rain. She approached quickly, one hand shielding her radio. "Claire, we've got units checking the main exits out of town and security cams at the highway. You did the right thing calling us." "I got this text," Claire said, holding out her phone. Hannah glanced at it, her expression hardening. "Classic intimidation tactic," the sergeant said. "He wants to buy time. We're going to trace it." She signaled to another officer, who hurried back to the SUV. "We'll find her." Claire swallowed hard. "You don't know that." Hannah looked her in the eye. "I do, because people like him always slip." Across the street, Jack Callahan stood under the diner's awning, a paper coffee cup warming his palms. He had been on his way home when he saw the flashing lights. The air carried that tense hush that follows when something goes wrong in a small town. Through the mist and rain, he recognized Claire, her hair plastered to her face, her body trembling. He didn't know what had happened yet, but instinct told him it was bad. He crossed the street slowly. "Sergeant Brooks," he called. "Everything all right?" Hannah turned, recognizing him. "Jack, you still riding with the Veterans Club?" "Yeah," he said. "What's going on?" She hesitated a beat before answering. "Child abduction. Just happened at the library." Jack's stomach twisted. "The Donovan girl?" Hannah nodded grimly. "We'll circulate her picture to local businesses. You can help if you want. Keep your eyes open." "Count on it," he said quietly. The rain came harder, streaking down his jacket as he walked back to his truck. He paused, looking up at the sky, the mountains hidden behind low clouds. There was a sound in the distance, a siren, faint but rising, and beneath it, something else. The echo of a memory. His sister's voice calling from years ago, the night she never came home. Jack gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles whitened. He had promised himself never to relive that pain. But tonight, fate had drawn a circle. Another little girl. Another cry too easy to miss. He started the engine and pulled onto Main Street, the wipers beating like a heartbeat. Somewhere out there, a child was alone and afraid. And for the first time in years, Jack Callahan didn't drive away. The next morning broke cold and clear. The rain washed away, but leaving a damp silence over Whitefish. A thin layer of mist curled between the mountains, hanging low over the roofs of the town. The posters went up early. Emily Donovan's face smiling from every lamppost, bulletin board, and diner window. Missing. 8 years old. Blue raincoat. Last seen at the public library. Jack Callahan saw one taped beside the gas pump as he filled his motorcycle. The paper fluttered in the wind, the ink already starting to blur from the night's drizzle. He traced the name with his eyes, Emily. The dragon doodle at the corner of the poster caught his attention. A child's attempt to make her missing notice looked less frightening. His chest tightened. He paid for his gas, climbed onto his bike, and headed toward town. The rumble of the engine was steady, familiar, an anchor against the noise in his head. He told himself he was just going to pick up groceries, just a normal day. But when he reached the Super One Foods parking lot, he saw the police cruiser idling near the entrance, and Sergeant Hannah Brooks standing beside it, talking to the store manager. Jack parked near the edge of the lot and pulled off his gloves. "Morning, Sergeant," he called. Hannah looked up. "Jack, you seen anything unusual last night?" "Not a thing," he said. "But I saw the posters. Whole town's talking." "They should be," she replied. "We got a few camera angles near the library, but nothing clear. We're running plate checks. The mother's holding up, but barely." Jack nodded, his jaw tightening. He could still picture Claire's face in the rain hollow, desperate. He remembered that same look in his own mother's eyes the night Sophie disappeared. "If there's anything I can do, just keep your eyes open," Hannah said. "Sometimes it's the smallest thing that breaks a case." He left her there and walked into the store. The warmth hit him immediately, mixed with the scent of coffee and fresh bread. The aisles glowed under bright lights, filled with the quiet chatter of morning shoppers. Ordinary life, rolling on. Jack grabbed a cart and pushed it slowly down the cereal aisle. He wasn't really thinking about what he needed. He was thinking about Sophie. She'd been 12, not much older than Emily. It was a fall afternoon then, too. He had been supposed to walk her home from band practice, but a friend had asked him to help tune a motorcycle engine, and he'd said he'd catch up later. He never did. He turned the corner into the snack aisle and stopped. A few yards ahead, a man was standing beside a cart, his posture stiff. He was talking to a little girl. She wore a blue raincoat, her blonde hair damp and tangled. Her shoulders were hunched, and she kept glancing toward the floor. The man said something softly, too low for Jack to hear, then placed a hand on her back. Jack's stomach knotted. He stepped closer, pretending to browse the shelf of crackers. The girl turned slightly, just enough for him to see her face. Wide blue eyes, pale skin, lips pressed tight. It was her, Emily. She lifted her hand as if to scratch her hair, then paused, her thumb folded into her palm, her fingers curled over it. Once, then again. Jack froze. The movement was small, almost invisible, but it struck him like thunder. He'd seen that gesture on the evening news months ago, the hand signal for help. A quiet cry that only those who paid attention would notice. Emily glanced toward him briefly, her expression blank, as if she was afraid even to hope. Jack's breath hitched. He turned away quickly, pretending not to notice, his pulse racing. His mind screamed, do something, but his body stayed still, trapped between fear and disbelief. He looked down at his phone, fingers trembling above the screen. He could call the police. He should call the police. But what if he was wrong? What if he misunderstood? He peeked again down the aisle. The man Darren was checking the price of canned soup, his hand still resting lightly on Emily's shoulder. The little girl's eyes met Jack's for a second time. The air around him seemed to close in. Jack's throat tightened. His hand hovered over his phone, then fell away. 1,000 thoughts collided. Logic, fear, memory. What if I'm wrong? What if it's not her? What if this ruins someone's life? The voice in his head sounded like every doubt he'd ever carried. But beneath it, another voice whispered Sophie's voice. You didn't see me in time. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to breathe. The man was steering Emily toward the checkout. Jack followed, staying 2 aisles back, pretending to study the shelves. Every instinct screamed for him to act, but caution kept him rooted. He needed proof. At the end of the aisle, he saw Darren speak to the cashier, a young woman scanning groceries without looking up. Emily stood beside him, her eyes fixed on the glass door that led outside. Her fingers fidgeted against her backpack strap, twitching as if ready to repeat the signal again. Jack pulled his phone from his pocket and snapped a photo. The shutter was silent, but the flash of his movement caught Emily's eye. She froze. For the first time, real fear flickered across her face, fear not of him, but of what might happen if he disappeared like everyone else who'd looked the other way. Jack's chest ached. He moved toward the service counter, catching the cashier's attention. That man, he said under his breath, nodding toward Darren. Do you know him? The cashier glanced over, frowning. No? Why? Because that little girl she's missing. The cashier's eyes widened. Jack didn't wait for her response. He walked toward the automatic doors, timing his steps with Darren's. The man pushed the cart outside, umbrella in hand. Emily followed silently. Jack stepped into the rain behind them, his boots splashing through puddles. The parking lot stretched wide and empty, except for a few cars glistening under the gray sky. He watched as Darren opened the trunk of a dark sedan, the same one described on the police radio last night. Jack's heart pounded. Do something. He reached into his pocket, hitting the call button. Sergeant Brooks, he said as soon as she answered. It's Jack Callahan. I think I've got your girl. Where? Super One Foods parking lot. Blue raincoat. Man with glasses. Dark sedan. Idaho plates Harlow, I think. Stay back, she said sharply. We're dispatching units now. Don't engage. End. But it was too late for staying back. Darren had noticed him. Their eyes met across the lot. Jack, standing near his bike. Darren, frozen beside the open car door. For a brief second, the air went still, filled only with the soft hiss of rain. Then Darren's face shifted recognition, suspicion, then panic. He grabbed Emily's arm and yanked her toward the car. Hey! Jack shouted, striding forward. His voice cut through the drizzle. Let her go! Emily twisted, struggling. Help, she cried, the word breaking into the air like a flare. Jack ran. The world narrowed to the sound of his boots hitting wet asphalt, the rush of blood in his ears. Darren shoved Emily into the back seat, slammed the door, and sprinted for the driver's side. Jack reached the car just as the engine roared to life. He slammed his hand on the window. Stop! The car lurched backward, tires spinning. Jack stumbled but caught his balance. For a heartbeat, he locked eyes with Emily through the glass. She made the signal again, thumb tucked, fingers folded. He nodded once, firmly. I see you now. The sedan sped out of the lot, spraying water behind it. Jack jumped onto his motorcycle, the engine growling beneath him. He could already hear sirens in the distance, faint but closing. Rain whipped against his face as he kicked the bike into gear. Not this time, he muttered. He gunned the throttle and followed the car into the storm. The highway out of Whitefish wound through the pine-covered foothills like a gray ribbon, slick from the rain. The clouds hung low, brushing the treetops, and the air smelled of wet earth and gasoline. Jack's motorcycle roared down the road, its headlights cutting through the mist as he chased the taillights of the dark sedan ahead. His heart hammered so hard it drowned out the sound of the engine. He wasn't a cop. He wasn't even sure what he planned to do when he caught up. But he knew one thing. He couldn't lose that car. Not again. The sedan veered onto a narrow county road, tires throwing up gravel. Jack followed, leaning into the turn, the spray hitting his face like cold needles. He caught flashes of movement inside the car, Emily's small figure pressed against the window, the outline of the man's arm jerking the wheel. Memories clawed their way up from the dark corners of his mind. Sophie walking home from band practice, her backpack bouncing, the sound of her laughter trailing behind him. The day he let her go alone, thinking nothing bad could happen in a town like theirs. The day everything stopped. He opened the throttle wider. "Not this time," he growled. Up ahead, the road narrowed, bordered by pine and steep drop-offs. The sedan fishtailed slightly on a curve. Jack saw his chance. He closed the gap, his engine roaring louder. The man in the car glanced in the rearview mirror, panic flashing across his face. Darren hit the brakes suddenly, trying to make Jack overshoot. Jack swerved hard, his tires skidding on the wet asphalt. The world spun for half a heartbeat, the bike wobbling violently before he regained control. Adrenaline burned through him. The sedan accelerated again, but the road was curving downhill toward a small bridge, old, wooden, the kind used more by fishermen than commuters. Beyond it, the land opened into meadows and mist. Jack could see flashing lights in the distance. The police must have picked up the chase. He didn't have long. He pulled up beside the car, the bike growling at its limit. Through the side window, he saw Emily. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with terror. The man's hand was gripping her shoulder, his mouth moving in angry bursts. Jack shouted over the roar of engines, "Let her go!" The man glanced sideways, startled to see the biker beside him. For a second, confusion flickered in his eyes. Maybe he recognized Jack from the store, maybe from somewhere else. Then rage replaced it. He jerked the wheel toward the motorcycle. Jack swerved, barely missing the car's fender. His rear tire skidded, but he kept control, pulling back into line. "Hang on, kid," he muttered. He reached for the small radio clipped to his jacket, a habit from his volunteer search and rescue days. "Sergeant Brooks, it's Callahan," he said, his voice strained over the static. "Eastbound on County 42, approaching the bridge. I'm right behind him. Units are 2 minutes out," came Hannah's voice. "Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage." But Jack didn't answer. The sedan hit the bridge, its wheels thumping across the planks. Jack followed close behind, the wooden boards vibrating under the combined weight. Halfway across, he saw Darren's brake lights flash again too sudden. The car skidded sideways, clipping the railing. Jack braked hard, the bike fishtailing, stopping just short of the wreck. The sedan came to a halt, steam rising from under its crumpled hood. For a heartbeat, the world was utterly still. Then, the driver's door burst open. Darren stumbled out, bleeding from a cut above his eyebrow, eyes wild. He looked less like a kidnapper now, and more like a man cornered by his own choices. He glanced toward the woods, toward escape, then back at Jack. Jack dismounted slowly, rain dripping from his jacket. His voice came out low and steady. "It's over." Darren shook his head, backing away.
You don't understand. She's mine. She was supposed to be...
"She's a child," Jack said, stepping forward. "And you don't get to decide what she is." And behind him, Emily's small voice carried through the cracked car window. "Help me." The sound hit Jack like a bullet of truth, small, shaking, but brave. He turned his head slightly, his voice softening. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now." Then he looked back at Darren. "Walk away while you still can." Darren's face twisted, part fury, part despair. "No one walks away from me." He lunged toward the car. Jack's instincts took over. He moved fast, intercepting Darren before he reached the door. The man swung wildly, but Jack deflected the blow, shoving him back. Years of discipline, of quiet restraint, burst to the surface. Not violence, just purpose. They struggled briefly, feet sliding on the wet boards. Darren's arm caught the railing, sending a piece of wood splintering into the river below. For a second, they both froze, the sound of sirens swelling closer through the mist. And then Darren did something Jack didn't expect. He stopped fighting. His shoulders sagged. "You think she'll ever be safe?" he spat bitterly. "You can't protect them. Not forever." Jack met his eyes, the words cutting deep. "Maybe not, but we try anyway." The distant wail of police sirens grew louder. Red and blue lights flickered through the trees. Darren looked over his shoulder, realizing his time was up. He took one step back toward the railing and slipped. Jack lunged forward instinctively, grabbing his arm. The momentum nearly pulled him over too. "Don't!" he shouted. For an instant, their eyes locked, fear and fury mixing with regret. Then Darren's grip broke. He plunged into the dark water below. Jack stood there, breathing hard, rain mixing with the spray from the river. He stared down, but the current swallowed the man whole. Behind him, the sound of car doors slamming and voices shouting filled the bridge. Sergeant Brooks was the first to reach him. "Jack, are you hurt?" He shook his head, turning toward the car. Emily sat trembling in the back seat, tears streaming down her face. Jack's voice cracked as he said softly, "She's okay." Hannah followed his gaze, her expression softening. "You did good, Callahan. You brought her home." But Jack didn't feel like a hero. He felt something heavier, older, redemption maybe, or the beginning of it. He looked at Emily, the small, shivering girl who'd had the courage to ask for help. And for the first time in 30 years, he let himself breathe. The flashing lights bathed the bridge in red and blue, flickering against the wet boards like restless ghosts. Jack stood there motionless, the adrenaline draining from his body, leaving only exhaustion in its place. The river rushed below, black and merciless, carrying away what was left of the man who had taken the child. Hannah Brooks's voice cut through the static of police radios. "Paramedics are 2 minutes out. Secure the perimeter." She turned toward Jack, her tone softening. "You all right?" He nodded slowly, though his hands trembled. "I'm fine." He wasn't, but it didn't matter. His eyes went back to the car, where a young officer was gently opening the back door. Emily clung to her seatbelt as if it were the only solid thing in the world. Her face was streaked with tears, her little hands shaking. When she saw Jack, she froze for a moment, as though she wasn't sure if he was real or just another trick of fear. Jack crouched beside the open door, rain dripping from the brim of his helmet. "Hey," he said softly, his voice steady now, gentle like he was talking to a frightened bird. "You did good, sweetheart. You're safe." Emily's bottom lip quivered. He said my mom was hurt." Jack's throat tightened. He lied. "Your mom's okay. She's been looking for you." Her eyes filled again, and then, with a small sob, she reached toward him. Jack hesitated only a second before lifting her into his arms. She was so light, trembling like a leaf. He could feel the pounding of her heart against his chest, matching his own. The sirens faded as paramedics took over, wrapping blankets around her small shoulders. Hannah walked over, her expression a mix of relief and awe. "If you hadn't followed him," Jack looked away. "If I'd done what I was told, she'd be gone." Hannah gave a small, tired smile. "You followed your gut. That's what saved her." He didn't answer. His gaze had drifted toward the water again. He thought of Sophie, 12 years old, laughing in the golden light of an autumn afternoon. He had carried her ghost for decades, and now, standing in the rain with a rescued child in his arms, he realized something he hadn't let himself believe in a long time. Maybe redemption doesn't erase the past, but it gives it purpose. A few minutes later, the sound of tires on wet gravel announced another arrival. A car pulled up fast, skidding slightly. The door flew open before it stopped moving. Claire Donovan ran toward them, her hospital scrub still damp from the rain, her hair clinging to her face. "Emily!" she screamed, her voice cracking with terror and hope all at once. Emily turned, eyes wide, and then broke free of the paramedic's hold. "Mom!" The world seemed to stop for that one instant as mother and daughter collided in the middle of the bridge. Claire dropped to her knees, wrapping Emily so tightly that neither could breathe. The sound that came from her throat was half sob, half prayer.
"I've got you, baby. I've got you."
Jack stepped back, giving them space. He turned toward the edge of the bridge, the rain washing the dirt and blood from his hands. Claire looked up after a moment, her tear-streaked face searching the crowd until she found him. She rose slowly, still holding Emily's hand, and walked toward him. "You're the one who—" Her voice broke before she could finish. "How can I ever thank you?" Jack shook his head. "Don't thank me. Thank her." He nodded at Emily. She remembered the signal. She's the brave one. Claire wiped her face, her voice trembling. "You saved her life." He gave a faint smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "She saved mine." For a long second, none of them spoke. The rain had softened into a mist, and the clouds were breaking apart above the mountains. A faint streak of light glimmered through, turning the river silver. Claire finally said, "Please, give me your number. I need to—" Jack raised a hand gently. "You don't owe me anything, ma'am. Just take her home." But Claire's expression was steady now. "You gave me back my child. At least let me thank you properly." Something in her tone left no room for refusal. Jack nodded and handed her his card, just his name, and the number of the small repair shop he ran by the tracks. As she took it, Emily stepped forward. "You're the biker who saw me," she said softly. He crouched again, so they were eye to eye. "That's right." She smiled, a small, shy smile that felt like sunlight after a storm. "I'm gonna draw you a dragon," she whispered. "Like the one I made for Mom." Jack's eyes glistened. "I'd like that." The police began clearing the bridge, guiding everyone back toward their vehicles. Claire carried Emily to the paramedic van for a checkup. Jack stood for a moment longer, the mist curling around him, the hum of the river below, steady and eternal. For the first time in 30 years, he didn't hear Sophie's voice accusing him. He heard her whispering, soft and proud, "You did it right this time, big brother." He exhaled, long and deep, letting the rain wash over him like forgiveness. Then he turned toward his motorcycle, the one thing that had always carried him forward, and climbed on. The engine rumbled to life, a heartbeat against the quiet morning. He looked once more at the flashing lights in the distance, then eased down the road, the mist closing gently behind him. Somewhere behind, a mother held her child. Somewhere ahead, the sky was clearing, and for the first time, Jack Callahan rode, not to escape his past, but toward peace. A week had passed since the bridge. In a small town like Whitefish, news traveled fast, but stories about miracles traveled faster. Everyone knew about the biker who chased down a kidnapper and the little girl who used a hand signal to call for help. Posters that once read "missing" now said "thank you." Jack Callahan couldn't escape it. Every time he walked into the diner, someone would pay for his coffee, pat his shoulder, or whisper his name with admiration. He'd nod politely, say "thank you," then retreat to his corner booth by the window. He never liked being called a hero. Heroes fix things. He had only tried, this time, not to fail. Outside, the first snow of November dusted the ground, turning Main Street into a quiet postcard. The diner's old jukebox played Patsy Cline, and the smell of cinnamon rolls drifted from the kitchen. Jack stared at his coffee, watching the steam rise and fade. He had stopped riding for a few days, partly because of the weather, partly because of the weight in his chest he didn't quite understand. The chase, the bridge, the look in Emily's eyes. When she saw him, it all haunted him in a way that didn't hurt, but didn't heal either. He thought saving the girl might silence the guilt that had followed him all his life. But guilt wasn't a wound, it was a shadow. And shadows didn't vanish, they just changed shape. The bell above the diner door jingled. Jack looked up. Claire Donovan stood there, wrapped in a wool coat, her cheeks pink from the cold. Behind her was Emily, clutching a sketchbook against her chest. They spotted him almost immediately. Claire smiled tentative, like someone stepping into a memory that might still sting. "We didn't mean to intrude," she said, her voice gentle. "But someone told me you're here every morning." Jack stood, awkward and unsure. "Just habit," he said, gesturing to the booth. "Coffee's better when you can see the snowfall." Claire chuckled softly. "Then we're in the right place." They slid into the booth across from him. Emily opened her sketchbook, eyes bright. "I finished it," she said, turning the page toward him. It was a drawing of a motorcycle, his motorcycle parked on a bridge, under a gray sky. Beside it stood a big man with kind eyes and a small girl holding his hand. Above them, Written in careful block letters were the words, "The man who saw me." Jack stared at it for a long time. His throat tightened, and he had to clear it before he could speak. That's beautiful, kiddo," Emily beamed. "Mom says we're going to hang it in my room, next to the one of the dragon." Claire smiled at her daughter, then turned to Jack. "She doesn't sleep well yet, but the therapist says talking about what happened helps. Drawing helps too." Jack nodded, his voice low. "She's stronger than most adults I've met." Claire folded her hands on the table, the wedding band she no longer wore leaving a faint pale mark. "We both wanted to thank you properly. There's a community meeting tonight at the school. They're starting a safety program. The sheriff asked if you'd speak. Just a few words about what you saw, about recognizing the signal." Jack frowned slightly. "I'm not much for speeches." Claire leaned forward, her eyes kind. "You don't have to make a speech. Just tell them what you told Emily, that paying attention can save a life." He hesitated. His instinct was to say no, to keep his distance, to let this be over. But then Emily reached across the table and rested her small hand on his rough one. "Please come," she whispered. "People listen to you." Something inside him gave way a small, quiet surrender. "All right," he said finally. "I'll come." Emily grinned, swinging her legs under the booth. Claire exhaled, her smile soft and full of something unspoken relief. Maybe gratitude. For a while, they just sat there, the three of them, sipping cocoa and coffee while snowflakes drifted lazily past the window. The world outside was still and clean, as if the storm that had torn through their lives had finally passed. Jack glanced at the drawing again, his finger tracing the words, "The man who saw me." He thought of Sophie then not with pain, but with memory. Her laughter, her stubbornness, her bright red scarf the day she disappeared. He imagined her somewhere beyond the snow, smiling at the girl he'd helped save. And for the first time, the echo of her voice didn't sound like guilt. It sounded like peace. That evening, the gymnasium at Whitefish Elementary buzzed with the low murmur of a community coming together. Folding chairs filled every inch of the varnished floor. Parents held hands. Grandparents leaned close to hear. Children fidgeted with cups of hot cider. The air smelled faintly of pine and wax, the kind of scent that only small-town schools seemed to carry. A banner hung at the front, hand-painted by local students. "Community Safety Night, protect each other." Jack Callahan stood near the back, hands in his jacket pockets, wishing he could disappear into the wall. He hadn't been inside a school since Sophie's memorial service 30 years ago. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, and each sound, each whisper, each cough seemed to echo through his chest. Sergeant Hannah Brooks stepped up to the podium first. She spoke clearly, describing the new town-wide initiative to teach children the signal for help gesture, how it worked, why it mattered. Parents nodded. A few took notes. The memory of Emily Donovan's abduction was still too fresh, too close. When she finished, she turned toward the side of the stage. "And now," she said, "someone who needs no introduction, the man who saw what no one else did and acted." Jack stiffened. Claire, sitting in the front row beside Emily, turned in her seat and gave him a small, encouraging nod. He walked up slowly, boots heavy against the wood floor. The microphone squealed once, then settled into silence. For a moment, he didn't speak. He just looked out at the crowd, so many faces, ordinary and kind. He could see in them the same fear, the same love, the same quiet hope that lived in every parent he'd ever known. "I'm not good with speeches," he began, his voice low and rough. "Never have been. But I guess I should tell you what I saw that day." He paused, glancing toward Emily. The little girl smiled at him shyly, clutching her mother's hand. "I saw a man who looked ordinary," Jack said, "and a little girl who didn't. Not because of what she wore or how she looked, but because she was scared. Most folks would have said it was none of their business. I almost did too. But she made a sign." He lifted his hand and demonstrated, thumb tucked in, fingers folded over. "It's called the signal for help. I'd seen it before, learned it at a training class years ago. I didn't think I'd ever need it." He lowered his hand slowly. "But I did. And because that child remembered something she learned in school, and because someone in the crowd recognized it, she went home." The room was silent. You could hear the faint creak of the gym doors, the rustle of jackets, the breath of people holding back tears. Jack took a step back from the microphone. I don't feel like a hero, he said softly. I just did what I wish someone had done for my sister. Her name was Sophie. She never came home. His voice faltered but steadied again. For 30 years, I carried that weight. And then one day, life gave me a chance to do something different, to make it right for someone else. Maybe that's what redemption is. Not erasing the past, but changing what we do with it. He looked at Claire and Emily. We can't protect everyone. Not always. But we can pay attention. We can choose to care, even when it's inconvenient, even when it hurts. He nodded once, stepped away from the mic. The crowd rose to their feet. The applause started small, one clap, then another, and grew until it filled the gym like the sound of a train rolling through the valley. Jack didn't bow. He just smiled faintly and walked off the stage, his boots echoing on the polished floor. When he reached the side door, Claire was there waiting for him. You did beautifully, she said, her eyes bright. I just told the truth, he murmured. Emily slipped between them and hugged his leg. Uncle Jack, she said softly, the nickname she'd started using a few days ago. Mom says you're coming for dinner this weekend. Jack blinked, surprised. I am? Claire laughed. You are now, Sunday, no excuses. He started to protest, then stopped. All right, he said. Sunday it is. They walked together toward the parking lot, where the first real snow of the season had begun to fall, thick flakes swirling under the streetlights, soft and slow. The town felt quieter, safer somehow. As Jack watched Claire buckle Emily into the car, a calm he hadn't felt in decades settled over him. Not triumph, not pride, something humbler. A sense that the world, broken as it was, could still find ways to heal itself. Before leaving, Emily rolled down her window and called out, "Good night, Uncle Jack." He grinned, lifting a hand. "Good night, kiddo." The car pulled away, its taillights glowing red against the white snow. Jack stood there a long time, watching until they vanished down Main Street. Then he turned his face to the sky, letting the snow settle in his beard, cold and clean. He thought of Sophie again, her laughter carried somewhere in the wind, no longer a ghost but a memory, finally at rest. And as the snow kept falling, Jack whispered into the night, "I saw her too." Snow blanketed Whitefish, turning the town into a postcard of quiet peace. Jack Callahan hadn't celebrated Christmas in decades, but that changed the morning he found a small envelope on his doorstep. On it, in uneven handwriting, were the words, "To Uncle Jack." Inside, a card, a dragon tangled in lights, and the invitation, "Come to dinner, Christmas Eve." That night, he stood outside the Donovans' small yellow house, brushing snow from his jacket. Inside, warm light flickered across the windows. Laughter drifted faintly through the glass. He knocked, and Claire opened the door with a smile that felt like sunlight. Traffic was terrible, he joked, stepping in. Emily rushed to him, eyes bright. "You came! Mom let me bake the pie, only burned it a little." The house smelled of cinnamon and pine. The meal was simple roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, cocoa steaming in mugs, but it felt like grace. After dinner, Emily handed him a tiny gift, a handmade ornament shaped like a motorcycle, tied with red ribbon. "It's for your tree," she said proudly, "so it doesn't get lonely." Jack hung it on their tree instead. The small room glowed, and for a moment, he realized how long it had been since he'd felt this kind of warmth. Later, the fire burned low. Emily slept curled on the couch, her hand clutching a paper dragon. Jack and Claire sat nearby, voices soft. "She doesn't wake up crying anymore," Claire whispered. "Not since that night." Jack nodded slowly. "She's stronger than anyone I've known." "Is her?" Claire hesitated. "You've lost someone too, haven't you?" He nodded. "My sister Sophie. I was supposed to walk her home. She never made it." Claire's eyes filled. "You didn't just save Emily, Jack. You gave Sophie's love somewhere to go." He looked down at the sleeping child, the truth of her words sinking deep. "Maybe that's what redemption is," he murmured. "Not fixing the past, but doing right when we finally can." They sat quietly, listening to the fire crackle. Outside, snow fell steady and pure. Claire smiled faintly. "You know, you could stay for Christmas morning. There's always more cocoa than sense in this house." Jack chuckled. "That an invitation?" She met his eyes. "It's a promise." He looked around at the lights, the warmth, the child breathing softly nearby, and for the first time in years, the ache in his chest eased. He reached into his coat, took out Sophie's old photograph, and set it by the paper angel on the mantel. "She'd have liked it here," he said. Claire laid her hand on his. "Then she's here, every time you choose to stay." Outside, the snow whispered against the windows, quiet, endless, forgiving. And Jack Callahan, once a man haunted by ghosts, whispered back, "I'm not running anymore." By late March, winter had loosened its grip on Whitefish. The heavy snows were gone, replaced by melting icicles and muddy sidewalks. The lake shimmered again under the morning sun, and the mountains wore streaks of green and gold where the thaw had begun. The town felt alive, breathing easier, as if everyone, in their own quiet way, was learning to begin again. Jack Callahan rode slowly down Main Street, his motorcycle humming like a low memory. He passed the diner where people still greeted him with nods and smiles. The missing poster that once hung by the bulletin board had been replaced months ago. Now it read, "Thank you for paying attention." Someone had drawn a little dragon in the corner. He parked by the curb outside the Donovan's house, the small yellow one with the white porch and wind chimes that sang even when there was no wind. From inside came the sound of a piano halting notes, uneven but determined. He smiled. Emily was learning to play. When Claire opened the door, she was wearing an old flannel shirt over jeans, her hair tied back in a loose braid. "You're early," she said, smiling. "Habit," Jack replied, handing her a paper bag. "Brought muffins from Betty's. She says they're burnt just enough to taste homemade." Claire laughed. "That sounds like Betty." Emily came running from the living room, nearly tripping over a rug. "Uncle Jack, guess what? Mom says we can plant the garden today." Jack bent down, pretending to inspect the backyard through the window. "Well, looks like good dragon territory to me," she giggled. "No dragons this time, just flowers." Claire leaned against the doorway, her eyes soft. "We thought maybe you'd help us choose what to plant." Jack nodded slowly. "Yeah, I'd like that." They spent the afternoon in the backyard, sleeves rolled up, dirt on their hands, sunlight on their faces. Emily knelt by the soil, placing tiny seeds one by one. Jack showed her how to space them properly. His big hands, surprisingly gentle. Claire watched from the porch, her heart full at the sight. Two people, once strangers, now quietly building something that looked a lot like home. When they paused for lemonade, Emily sat cross-legged on the grass. "Uncle Jack," she said suddenly, "were you scared that day on the bridge?" Jack thought for a moment. "Yeah, I was. But sometimes you've got to be scared and do it anyway. That's what being brave really means." Emily nodded solemnly, like she was storing that truth somewhere deep. "I was scared too. But when I saw you, I wasn't anymore." Jack smiled faintly. "Then I guess we were brave together." The air grew cooler as the sun dipped behind the trees. They walked to the old bridge at the edge of town, the same one that had once divided fear from hope. The planks were dry now, repaired by the community after the storm. Someone had tied a small blue ribbon to the railing, a quiet symbol of gratitude. Emily leaned over the side, pointing. "That's where the police cars were, and that's where you ran." Jack chuckled softly. "Feels like a lifetime ago." Claire joined him by the railing. "It changed everything," she said quietly. "That day, I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. Turns out, it was just beginning." Jack's eyes traced the flowing water below. "I used to hate this bridge," he admitted. "It reminded me of what I couldn't change. But now, it feels like a place that gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever." Claire turned toward him, the breeze lifting strands of her hair. "What's that?" He smiled gently. "A reason to stay." They stood side by side, the soft rush of the river filling the silence between them. Emily skipped along the bridge's edge, humming to herself, stopping now and then to pick up pebbles. The late sunlight made her hair shine like gold. Claire glanced at Jack. "You know, she calls you the man who saw me. She says it's because you looked when no one else did." Jack's throat tightened. "She saw me too," he said softly, "in a way no one had in a long time." They stayed there until the light faded to amber. Then Emily came running back, holding something in her hands, a small paper dragon she'd folded from an old receipt. "It's for Sophie," she said, offering it to Jack. He took it gently, his fingers trembling. "Thank you, sweetheart." He set the dragon on the railing, watching the wind lift its wings slightly. "She'd have liked you," he murmured. Claire slipped her arm through his. "Then she's probably watching this moment right now." For the first time, Jack believed it might be true. The grief he'd carried for 30 years didn't vanish, but it felt lighter, like it had finally found a place to rest. They walked back together as twilight deepened, Emily running ahead, laughing. Behind them, the paper dragon danced once in the wind and settled softly against the bridge, bathed in golden light. Back at the house, Claire lit the porch lantern. The air smelled of earth and rain and something new possibility. Emily stood on the porch steps and pointed toward the horizon, where the mountains glowed pink in the fading Sunday. "Spring's here," she said proudly. Jack smiled. "Yeah, kiddo, it sure is." Claire looked at him for a long moment. "So, will you stay for dinner?" Jack took a slow breath, the air cool and clean. "Dinner?" he said, grinning. "I was hoping for dessert." She laughed, shaking her head. "There's pie left from Sunday." "Then I'm staying," he said simply. As the door closed behind them, the porch light flickered to life. Inside, voices mingled laughter, warmth, the sound of a new beginning, quietly unfolding. And outside, beneath the soft spring air, the wind carried one last whisper across the bridge and the water beyond. A man once lost his way, but by learning to see, he found his home again. Sometimes, redemption doesn't arrive in a grand gesture. It comes quietly, like spring melting the last patches of snow. Jack Callahan never imagined that a single glance, a child's signal, and a mother's courage could rebuild a life he thought was long lost. In the warmth of that little yellow house, he discovered something far stronger than regret, the simple miracle of being needed again. In life, love and forgiveness don't erase the past, they give it purpose. True kindness, like a porch light glowing on a cold Montana evening, doesn't shout or demand attention. It simply waits, guiding the lost back home. When we open our hearts, even after years of silence, we might just find that second chances were waiting for us all along. Perhaps that's the real secret of happiness. To care, even when it hurts. To show up, even when you're uncertain. To keep believing that love can still bloom after every winter. So tonight, dear friends, take a moment to think of your own home for spring. Maybe it's a person, a memory, or a chance you thought had passed. And if this story touched your heart, leave a 1 in the comments, or a 0 if you'd like to share how it could speak even more deeply to you. Because every story, just like every life, is a work in progress. And sometimes, all we need to start again is a little light in the window.